Off Build Live. My name is Seth Juarez, and we're here with none other than Executive Vice President of Cloud and AI, Scott Guthrie. How you doing, bud?
Good. Thanks for having me.
So, how was? Let's give a round of applause, by the way. How about that keynote? Like, we have an audience this year, and I want to spuriously get them to applaud. So, just whenever you want them to, just let them know. It's just
Okay.
time for applause. Okay. So, here's the question: You did your keynote. You mentioned a lot of points. What are some things if people could take away 3 things from your keynote? What would you have them take away?
Well, that's tough because we showed a lot of stuff.
Yeah, it was a lot.
It's about a 90-minute keynote.
Yeah.
I think the things that we highlighted that hopefully people saw is, just the amount of innovation that's happening,
Right.
whether it's in tools, DevOps, Kubernetes, edge computing, IoT, data analytics, AI. There's just so much that's happening. And, I think this keynote I felt particularly good on is just, everything we showed is pretty new and pretty differentiated.
Right.
And definitely in response to really customer feedback around things that people are looking for.
Right.
So that would be one. I think the other one is just, some amazing customers that were in the keynote talking about their solutions, whether it's BMW, ASOS, Olympus, talking about great hospital work, whether it's Unilever, whether it's Starbucks earlier in Satya's keynote, Kroger, Coca-Cola, Virgin Atlantic,
Right.
and more. I think it's great to be able to talk about tech, but it's even better when you can hear what people are actually doing with it. And hopefully, the final key takeaway, hopefully, is it's a fun time to be a developer.
Yep.
And hopefully there's a lot of things that we ship today and showcase that I think are really going to keep us all building some amazing solutions over the next year to the next build.
I love it. So, it's like you're showing stuff, you're showing how customers are benefiting it, and now it's time for all the developers to get on board and maybe do something with it too.
Yeah.
So, by the way, I will hog all of his time unless you ask questions. So make sure to ask questions at aka.ms. Microsoft Build Live. We want all of those questions to come in. I get them right over here, and he sees them right over there. And so we want your questions, so log in and get those questions going. Otherwise, I'll start asking. So let's start with Visual Studio.
Yep.
What were some of the things? I saw the cool demo, but just to recap, what were some of the cool investments we're making with Visual Studio to make developers more productive?
Yeah, the cool thing about Visual Studio, when you think about Visual Studio, I first started working on Visual Studio 22 years ago. At some point you think, there must be no more features left to add.
Right.
And, the Visual Studio team just does an amazing job every year of really driving developer productivity forward. And, in the demo today, we highlighted things like IntelliCode, which is basically using AI with IntelliSense so that, instead of just alphabetically showing members and methods, we now actually show you, based on AI, based on their code flow, what we think are the members that make the most sense. And it's subtle, but it just dramatically improves your productivity. We showed some of the improvements to live unit testing, which we had in the product before, but it wasn't fast enough for a lot of big projects, and now it's screaming fast. It comes with a whole bunch of great refactorings, and is now just built in. We showed off Live Share, which enables you to kind of effectively, pair program with anyone in the world, whether they're running Windows, whether they're running a Mac, whether they're running Linux, whether they're even using VS or VS Code. We're seeing just sort of transforming how collaboration's being done. And then we showed off the first peek of our new Visual Studio Online, which is a browser-based development tool that works on any device because it just needs a browser.
Right.
And supports both Visual Studio Code workspaces and Visual Studio projects, and gives you IntelliSense and debugging as well as Git source control all inside a browser. And it's really intended as a companion app. So, we don't think people are going to switch from using VS or VS Code to it, but it's great when you're on the road. It's great when you need to quickly log in and do something. It's going to be great when you want to do a code review with someone who doesn't have their PC or their Mac next to them. And is now available for people to use. So those are just some of the things in the Visual Studio side. And then obviously we showed a bunch of work in GitHub, including some of the new DevOps support so that you can do integrated Kubernetes-based pipelines, not just to Azure, but you can deploy it to on-prem. And so we showed deploying it to Azure, to OpenShift, which is Red Hat's offering on-prem, as well as even to an Amazon Kubernetes cluster using Amazon's EKS. Works with any cloud provider. We showed single sign-on, or talked about single sign-on with Azure Active Directory into GitHub. So you can now take GitHub and use it for all your enterprise developers in a secure way. And later today, you'll now be able to log into Azure using your GitHub account. So you no longer have to, have to have a Azure Active Directory or a Microsoft account. You can just log in with GitHub. And then lastly, we announced our new bundle of GitHub with Visual Studio subscriptions, which enable you to add, if you're a Visual Studio customer, add GitHub at a very low price to all your existing Visual Studio users. Those are just some of the things on the dev tooling side. I mean, that we covered.
It's a lot. I'm really excited about the GitHub login to Azure. Right? Because one of the experiences, you have some water there.
Thank you.
One of the experiences that I would love is for all developers, a lot of them use GitHub, being able to log in directly with your GitHub credentials into Azure is amazing. And when you're a new Azure user, you actually get some credits that you can use for free to start.
Yeah.
And it's not an insignificant amount.
Yeah, we give you about $200 worth of Azure credits if you sign up to Azure as a new developer. The other thing I always remind people, because I know a lot of people watching this are probably Visual Studio customers or developers, is if you've got a Visual Studio subscription, it comes with either $50, $100, or $150 of credits every month that you can use without needing a credit card to sign in and build things with Azure. So if you've got a Visual Studio subscription in your company, definitely make sure you're leveraging that with Azure. And then some of the other things that we announced today, for example, is with our Azure App Service offering, we now have a perpetual free trial. So you can basically build now a web app using Azure App Service and host it either on Windows or Linux for free forever. And that's not just a trial, that extends forever. And something you can take advantage of now as well.
Wait, so let me see if I understand. Because I heard that and I was like, did I hear that? So basically you can build a web app.
Yep.
Like say you're using like Hugo because you do like a static website. You can deploy to Azure for free in perpetuity.
If you're deploying a static website, one cool feature we also now have is the ability to deploy the static website to an Azure storage account and point your browser at it or point a DNS at it. And so that actually, for a static website, is probably the best way to do it because that costs like pennies a month. And I think we include some free storage built in. But yeah, for Azure Web Apps now, for both Linux and Windows, you can build, whether it's a Python app, a Node app, Java app, .NET Core app, and others. And you can even just take a container, any Docker container, and push it up and host it inside Azure Web Apps. And that is, entirely free forever.
Can we get a hand for that? I mean, you can go do that right now. Everyone's like, yeah, we hate free stuff. Oh, come on, right? I mean, it's pretty exciting. I remember when I used to, a long time ago, I ran like a 1 megabit line up to my house and I was hosting my site. And I'm like, I'm saving so much money. And then I looked at my cable bill and I was like, whoa, right? And so now you have the promise of the cloud and being able to deploy stuff for free now.
Yeah.
Which is pretty amazing.
And we're doing things like we announced today, for example, our new serverless database offering. So if you've got a low volume app or a low volume website, you can use the serverless option. You pay by the second. And so if you've got, large parts of the day when your site is not frequently used, that can save you some pretty dramatic money. And then with our Cosmos DB offering, you can now get Cosmos DB, and I think it supports, a couple hundred transactions per second, which is a lot, for 5 databases for, I think it's $24 a month. And so that's also a way that you can now take advantage of Cosmos, which gives you not just a SQL API, but also a MongoDB API and a Cassandra and now a Spark API all built in that you can leverage as well.
That's awesome. By the way, I'm going to keep asking questions. Keep the questions coming in, aka.ms/Microsoft Build Live. Now, I'm going to move on to some of the GitHub and Azure pipeline stuff that you talked about, because I wrote some notes as you were doing your talk. Tell us about what we're doing with GitHub. You mentioned a little bit of it before with Visual Studio, but let's get into that a little bit more as well.
Yeah, well, so Microsoft acquired GitHub, closed the acquisition of GitHub about 6 months ago. So we announced it about a year ago. It takes about 6 months for regulators to approve it, and then so it's only been part of Microsoft for about coming up on 6 months. But it's been great to see kind of in that 6 months, we've been able to do a lot. And I think generally the feedback from developers and GitHub, longtime GitHub users is, there's a lot of energy right now in GitHub. There's a lot of features shipping fast, a lot of long-standing requests over the last couple of years that we're now shipping on a weekly basis.
Right.
And then in January, we provide now what's called unlimited private repos, which was one of the most popularly requested capabilities of GitHub. And that basically means you can sign up to GitHub for free with no credit card, and you can have any number of private repositories that you host, at no charge. And you're going to see at the GitHub Satellite Developer event, which is a GitHub event that's happening in about 3 weeks, a whole bunch of new announcements and some really cool stuff that's coming. But today we announced sort of a couple of things as sort of a precursor. I didn't want to take all of Matt's, who runs GitHub for me, his thunder. But we announced, as I mentioned, the Azure AD integration for enterprise single sign-on, the GitHub into Azure identity integration, the bundle with Visual Studio subscriptions. And then, beyond new features, we also then just showed off how the combination really of GitHub plus Azure DevOps, which is part of GitHub Marketplace, super easy to wire up, gives you not just collaboration and source control and work item tracking, which you obviously get with GitHub, but also full CI/CD support that you can use to automate delivery of apps, including Kubernetes-based apps, to any cloud environment. And some of the new things that we shipped with our Azure DevOps solution today includes new YAML file support. So you can define all of your build pipelines, all of your CI and CD in one YAML file, which you can now version control. We make sure you don't check in your secrets in your YAML files. So you can store those all securely. But now you have full version control with YAML. And then we have some really good GUI-based tools that can help you create the YAML file, because YAML's super useful to edit, but it's not always the easiest thing to create.
Right.
And so you can now use a wizard GUI. You can write everything from scratch, or you can use some of our online web-based tools to create the YAML file and edit it. It's a pretty powerful story.
So one of the things that I'm most interested, you may or may not know, I love AI. I'm a huge fan of AI, and it feels like with Azure, AI is everywhere from the dot when you're doing Visual Studio coding to we have cognitive services to we have other services. Can you talk a little bit about the AI offering inside of Azure?
Yeah, one of the things that's powerful about Azure is we support and provide a bunch of pre-built AI models, things like speech and computer vision, and we've augmented several new capabilities today, one of which is ink recognizer, so you can take like an image of some handwriting and we'll actually transcribe it into text. And then we also ship a cool service called form recognizer. And so you can take a paper form, like a receipt from a restaurant, if you're building like an expense report app, or you could build, a tax form that someone submits. You just basically upload an image, and we will return back a JSON payload that actually shows you, all of the fields that have been filled out in the tables and formats. And all these things and we shipped also some new transcription speech service that lets you do real-time speech transcription.
Right.
And that's what we're using inside things like Teams and Skype and Xbox and a whole bunch of our other products. So all those things are pre-built AI models that you can use without having to be a data scientist. And then what's cool is we have, with our Azure Machine Learning service, tools for data scientists that can take those models and extend them, or build and train their own custom models that you can then use. And all of our models, both the pre-built ones as well as the ones you build with our Azure Machine Learning service, output AI models inside a container, a standard Docker container. And so what's cool is you can use them in the cloud, inside like an AKS cluster, but you can also download them and run them locally on premises or in an edge device. And so some of the demos in my keynote, for example, we showed a really great Kroger demo, which is a large retailer here in the US, and they're using computer vision, so they have cameras in their stores. And so when someone takes a box off the shelf, it can automatically detect that there's a gap in the shelf and even detect what type of product it is that's missing.
Wow.
And signal to the staff, oh, you're going to need to restock this item on this shelf. And what's cool is they're able to build that AI model, and they could run it in the cloud as a proof of concept. The downside, though, is if you're taking high-definition video off of a camera, it's going to be like terabytes of video per second that you're uploading across the stores. And so they're also using our DataBox Edge product which is an Azure service that's hardware. So you buy it from Microsoft, just delivers, you install it. It's a single blade, so you can easily rack it up or store it, run it anywhere. And it can actually run our AI models on it. You can run Azure Functions, you can run Kubernetes containers on it, and they're able to actually do the AI processing on the edge in the store and connect up the signals to the cloud. And it's a great example of kind of leveraging this sort of intelligent edge, intelligent cloud pattern to kind of distribute the app to run anywhere.
So one of the cool things is you mentioned this data box, like edge hardware with AI. Like one of the things that's interesting that I learned about with cognitive services is that we lift and shift containers down to on-premises. You mentioned that a little bit. Talk a little bit about how Azure will support the edge, because it feels a little counterintuitive because the edge is not the cloud, but it is part of the cloud. We want it to be. Tell us about that.
Well, I think there's two. One truism is you can never go faster than the speed of light.
Right.
And so for some set of scenarios, say for example you're in an autonomous vehicle, or you're in a retail store and you want to basically see when someone pulls something off the shelf, and sometimes it's going to be both faster, or in the case of bandwidth, cheaper to run that AI processing locally. And so what we're doing at Microsoft is we've got a range of hardware devices that we showed in the keynote, ranging from our Azure stack, which is, starts at kind of 3 servers, and it's sort of a mini data center, if you will, that you can install inside any facility. And that gives you a whole bunch of Azure services. But we now have extended it so this, for example, DataBox Edge is a single blade. So it's very small. You can pretty much fit it anywhere, including in a small retail store.
Right.
And it also runs a subset of Azure services, including AI models. And it has FPGA processors. So you can actually process those models locally on that same hardware in addition to doing storage. We have our Azure IoT Edge, which is a Raspberry Pi device,
right,
or it can run on things as small as a Raspberry Pi, all the way down to our Azure Sphere, which is literally a microcontroller, which is sort of the size of this bottle cap, and costs $1 to buy.
Wow.
And that you can actually deploy and run code from Azure onto and integrate. And then we obviously have our Azure Connect, which is our depth sensing camera that you can also run AI models on top of, and HoloLens, which gives you mixed reality as a headset that you can also run Azure Edge and Azure AI models on top of. So, those are some examples of pre-built models or pre-built hardware that Microsoft provides that, make it far easier now to push out your cloud compute to run anywhere.
Right.
And then we have over 1,000 different hardware and partners that are Azure IoT certified now that you can then leverage. So if it's, for example, we've got drone manufacturers, so DJI.
Yeah, we saw that at the last build.
At last builds are the biggest drone manufacturer in the world. They can actually run Azure on that drone. And so people like Siemens, as an example, that do maintenance on big windmills and wind farms.
Right.
They're using the drone to fly around the wind farm, use computer vision on the drone to detect whether there's cracks in those giant blades, and they can basically schedule maintenance, all in a completely autonomous, disconnected way. And I think we're going to find increasingly that the cloud isn't just about running inside our data centers. It's really about running everywhere and really connecting everything out there in a deeper and deeper way.
So as we move computation out to the edge, how is the cloud involved in that? Because you showed a lot of demos. You had a lot of customers do a lot of demos. And it feels like for some people, it might be unclear how we leverage the cloud and the edge at the same time. Can you talk to some of the demos that maybe did a little bit of that and maybe help us figure that out?
Yeah, well, I think the thing to think about is it's not one or the other. It's in some ways, even if you go back to client-server computing, you run code on the client, you ran it on the server. You think about web-based computing, at one point it was, let's run it all on the on the server. The original ASP.NET was almost all server, and you ran very little JavaScript. Now there's an equilibrium where you're running more and more client code and building more single-page apps, but there's still stuff on the back end where you're doing your data and your overall back-end logic. And so it's, having this continuum where you can run code anywhere and everywhere, I think is the pattern that we're, just going to see be a continuous thing going forward. And, the big change that's happening now is everything is going to have an IP address going forward, whether it's my wearables, whether it's my car, whether it's my refrigerator, whether it's my garage door opener. Increasingly everything is going to be somehow connected, and having a computing model that lets you connect all those things together securely, manage it securely,
Right.
And take advantage of data and AI across that spectrum, I think is super powerful. I think one of the more powerful demos in the keynote, um, I already mentioned the Kroger as an example, but would be the BMW example
Right.
it showed, where BMW was on stage and showed off, and it's in fact on the expo floor. So there's a great BMW next generation X7 here. It's pretty darn cool.
Yeah.
And they are using Azure in a wide variety of places. So the mobile driver app is connected to Azure, and then Azure is connected to the car. They demoed in the keynote their new speech recognition. That's happening in the car, and it's using our bot framework, and it's using a set of skills to basically, some of them are pre-built ones, and then some of them are BMW-specific skills. And it's able to run in the car, but at the same time, it needs to pull data from the cloud. And so if you say in the car, schedule maintenance, you're going to want to have some amount of code running locally on the headset in the car, but you want to be able to have the cloud reach out to your dealer, set up an appointment for oil change, and coordinate all of that together in an integrated way. And so it's not going to be, is it all cloud or all in the car? It's this continuum that spans cloud, car, mobile phone, dealer, and in the case of BMW, even the manufacturing line. So they're now using Azure and Azure IoT to actually manufacture the cars and automate the in-process factories as well.
That's awesome. I mean, if they need any beta testers, I'm happy to just go over there and be like, hey, I'll borrow this for a couple minutes or hours or years. So we have some questions coming in. By the way, you can submit all your questions to aka.ms, Microsoft Build Live. We want all those questions. The first question is, how do you see Visual Studio Online changing the workplace for enterprise?
Well, the way we're kind of positioning Visual Studio Online, and I think it's important to understand is really as a companion app. I think originally a lot of the technology that we built, even for that we use inside Visual Studio Code today, was originally just ran inside the browser. And so we've always had a very browser-friendly approach to building VS Code. But what we found with VS Code in the early days, or when it ran as Monaco, which is the engine in the browser, was the browser is great for a certain set of things. It's not necessarily what I want to sit in and do my development 24 hours a day, or maybe 10 hours a day, because I do want to be able to have a local editing experience. But it's super useful because it's available anywhere. And so what we're trying to do with Visual Studio Online is really take advantage of that roots that we had with VS Code, where it was a browser-hosted engine, and take it now and run it in a browser. So it works in any browser on any platform. The demo, Scott Hanselman showed it running, for example, in Safari on an iPad, and use it as a companion for the other enterprise workflows you have. So if you've got a code review that you want to do, and you're at your desk working on your laptop or working on your desktop machine, and you happen to be at a remote site or at home, or not immediately available on your dev machine, I can actually just reach out to you and say, hey, I really want to check this in. Can we do a quick code review?
Right.
And the beauty is I can just send you a link, on SMS on your phone even, and you can click it. You're now in the editing experience. We can do a live share. We can even debug remotely, and we can do that code review directly in line together, and then you can approve, and it goes. I mean, I think we'll see a lot of those scenarios be amongst the first, where someone wants to quickly join a session or look at some code and work with it. And the beauty is it supports VS projects natively, and it supports Visual Studio Code workspaces.
Right.
So they'll just integrate with all the existing workflows you have, and it supports GitHub. And so you can actually launch a VS Online session directly against any GitHub repo.
That's really cool, because I mean, oftentimes sometimes I want to do more than just look at colored code, and I feel like Visual Studio Online is going to help me with that for the light touch type stuff.
Even do things like IntelliSense.
Which is really cool. All right, next question from Kevin. GitHub sign-on for Azure is great. Can we use WebAuth/UTF two-factor to sign into Azure too?
It's a good question. So one of the things we do support with Azure today, so to create an Azure account, you need either an Azure Active Directory account or a Microsoft account. And when you sign into GitHub, what we do is under the covers, we just create a Microsoft account for you. You don't need to know about it. You just sign in with your GitHub ID. And so you do need one of those in order to sign up for Azure. Now, what you can do, though, is once you're signed in, you can get a OAuth token or a SAML token back. And so if you want to, for example, build WebAuth workflows, you absolutely, and this is how, for example, our Bash CLI or PowerShell tools or our APIs work, you can absolutely go ahead and you sign in once with two-factor auth. We give you back a temporary token, and then you can absolutely drive WebAuth workflows against all of our APIs with it. So you can do it that way, and that does support two-factor auth. So hopefully that answers the question.
That's a good question. By the way, keep your questions coming. Microsoft Build Live, aka.ms, Microsoft Build Live. So you talked a little bit about data as well. There was a really interesting announcement about a database running like on a small device. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we talked about a couple of big announcements today. One is around our hyperscale offering. And so we're basically taking Azure SQL Database, now has a hyperscale edition and just general availability today. Postgres as a service also now has a hyperscale edition that's public preview today. And then we're announcing that in the future, we're going to add it to MySQL as well. And these hyperscale editions allow you now to have databases that are hundreds of terabytes in size and allow you to elastically scale out the compute to support millions of transactions per second. So those are great for very large cloud native solutions. And we're super excited about that.
Right.
The Postgres stuff in particular is something we enabled through acquisition of a company called Citus that we did a couple months ago. They're very big in the Postgres community. And a lot of the tech that we're delivering, we're also going to make available as open source libraries so you can use it anywhere, which is kind of cool as well. We announced our serverless option, which I talked about a little bit earlier. So you can basically now do serverless workflows and pay by the second. That's also great for cloud native. And then the third thing, which is this edge database that you mentioned, that we're pretty excited about, allows you to basically take SQL, which runs everywhere today. So you can run it in a VM anywhere. You can run it obviously on-prem. It supports Windows and Linux. But now you can actually run SQL on ARM processors locally on the edge. And so this could run, for example, SQL on a Raspberry Pi.
Which is amazing.
Yep, and you can do it with both Windows and Linux.
Wow.
And it gives you kind of an embedded database really designed for these very, very low power scenarios. But it's the same SQL engine. It also has built-in AI model capability, and it also supports time series, which we find is very useful for edge-based scenarios with IoT. You can take advantage of all that as well.
All right, so we're coming up on 2 minutes. Could you please, here's a question, could you please talk more about how Service Fabric fits into the Azure picture nowadays?
Sure. I mean, so we love Service Fabric, obviously. Most of our Azure services are built on Service Fabric today. And so all the database innovation I just talked about is Service Fabric. Cosmos DB is Service Fabric. Our Azure app service and functions is built on Service Fabric. So, we use Service Fabric heavily. One of the things we are doing, and I think we're talking about more at this event, is how we're also integrating Service Fabric and Kubernetes now. Mm-hmm. And within Azure, they're in fact now the same team. And we're trying to take the goodness of Service Fabric and some of the amazing capabilities it provides, and we're also allowing you to now integrate those into a standard Kubernetes environment. So you really get the best of both worlds, where you can basically take advantage of the standards-based microservice approach that Kubernetes provides, and that with Azure Kubernetes Service we obviously deliver, and then also take advantage of some of the stateful and some of the higher-level programming model capabilities that Service Fabric brings. And there's some great sessions here at the event that talk more about that.
That's awesome. And so the last thing was, you already mentioned the serverless, but there's so much that someone can do in Azure. If someone's new and they want to just start a workload on Azure, what do you suggest to them?
Well, yeah, but even whether you're new, there's obviously a lot. But even, your agent there woke up. Whether you're new, there's lots. But even if you're a longtime Azure user, there's a lot of stuff we ship today and continue to ship each month. And so, it can sometimes feel overwhelming. The thing that we're trying to do is both make, from a tooling perspective, how do we make it easier and easier to use, whether it's with Visual Studio, whether it's with the Azure portal, whether it's with GitHub, whether it's even with things like Power BI, Power Apps, and Flow that we showed in the keynote as well. And then the other thing that I could definitely recommend, if you haven't done it already, is go to Microsoft Learn. So Microsoft.com/learn.
Right.
this is our free training site. And this now has hundreds of hours of content. And it's not just a bunch of random videos. It really is curated learning paths. And we've got booths set up here at the event and all of our Ignite events we do around the world. We also are now having learning sessions and hands-on that you can use with Microsoft Learn. But just from home, if you're watching online, you can go to Microsoft.com/learn, and you can do training for free in a curated way. We give you like mini tests that you can take. Don't worry, no one reports the score.
Yeah, nobody.
But if you pass the test, you get badges. So we've kind of gamified it and made it fun. And it's a great way that you can kind of continually enhance your skills. And it's designed to be very snackable. So you can basically pick a particular thing you want to learn and spend 20 or 30 minutes and learn it. And we tell you exactly how long each path takes. And enable you to kind of in a bite-sized way keep doing more and more with the cloud. And hopefully take better and better advantage of it and have more and more fun.
Well, this has been awesome. As always, it's a pleasure having you on. Thanks so much for all the cool stuff you build. Thanks so much for watching. We're going to send it